at some point tonight after you go to sleep, the crows in your neighborhood will wake up. Not because something startled them, not because of a predator nearby. They will wake up because something is happening at 3 a.m. that they have been doing long before your neighborhood existed, long before the roads and the lights and the houses were built around the places they have always gathered. Something that researchers, even those who have spent careers studying corvid behavior, did not fully understand until recently. You have never seen it. Almost nobody has. Not because it is hidden exactly, but because it happens in the hours when the people who share territory with crows have gone quiet, and the crows have the world mostly to themselves. Tonight, we are going into the dark. We are going to follow what crows actually do when no one is watching, what researchers found when they finally did watch, and what that behavior reveals about a kind of intelligence that operates on a completely different schedule than our own. If this is your first time here, this channel exists for one reason: to show you what crow intelligence actually looks like up close, in the research, in the behavior, in the implications that most people never hear about. Subscribe now so you do not miss what comes next. Every video goes deeper than the last. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover tonight is the behavior that researchers described in their own notes as the one they did not expect to find. The one that changed the questions they were asking entirely. Most people who think about crows at night picture something simple: a bird sleeping on a branch. Still, quiet, waiting for morning. That is what we were taught. Birds sleep at night. The world goes quiet. Everything waits. The reality is far more specific, far stranger, and far more unsettling than that. Sleep for a crow is not a passive state of absence. It is a socially organized, locationally deliberate, informationally rich behavior that researchers now understand to be one of the most revealing windows into how crow cognition actually functions. What happens between roughly 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. in a crow roost is not rest in any simple sense. The crow you see in the morning has been through something during those dark hours that has updated its knowledge, reinforced its social bonds, and in certain documented cases, changed its behavior in ways that persist for weeks. The night is not downtime for crows. It is a different kind of work. The first thing researchers discovered when they began serious nighttime observation is that the roosts themselves are not random. Crows do not simply land wherever they are when darkness falls. They travel, sometimes up to 30 miles, to reach specific communal roost sites that can hold hundreds of thousands of birds in a single location. Kaylee Swift, researcher at the University of Washington, whose work on crow behavior in urban environments has produced some of the most detailed field documentation available, found that roost sites are selected based on factors that go well beyond simple shelter. Sight lines, proximity to food sources active the following morning, and critically, the presence of other crows who carry information about what happened in their territories during the previous day. That last point is the one that changes everything. When thousands of crows converge on a single roost, they are not simply sharing warmth. They are pooling information. Researchers observed that crows arriving from different territories engage in extended vocal exchanges before settling. Not alarm calls, not territorial displays. Something more sustained, more varied, and more directional. Specific birds calling towards specific other birds. Responses that seemed, by every behavioral measure available, to carry content. What the crows were doing in the pre-dawn darkness was talking. Thomas Bugner, professor of cognitive biology at the University of Vienna, has described crow roost behavior as one of the most under-researched areas in animal cognition. The scale of information exchange happening at a major crow roost on any given night, he noted, is almost certainly larger than anything we have been able to fully document. Because most of it happens in the dark, in a language we are still learning to read, between animals that have been doing this for thousands of years without any need for our understanding of it. You have driven past crow roosts. You may have seen the black silhouettes against a winter sky and thought, strange, loud, unsettling maybe. What you were looking at was an information exchange at a scale that has no real equivalent in the animal world outside of humans. The second thing researchers found required letting go of an assumption so fundamental that most scientists did not realize they were making it. The assumption that a crow sleeping is doing, neurologically, more or less what you are doing when you sleep. That assumption is wrong. Nicola Clayton, professor of comparative cognition at the University of Cambridge, has spent decades documenting the cognitive architecture of corvids. What her work revealed about crow sleep is something neuroscientists are still working to fully integrate into existing models. Crows experience REM sleep, but what happens during that REM sleep is neurologically distinct from most other birds, and in certain measurable ways, closer to what happens in sleeping mammals with advanced cognitive function. During REM sleep, crow brains show patterns of neural activity that researchers describe as replay. The brain reruns sequences of experience from the day, not randomly. The sequences that replay most strongly are those associated with the highest cognitive load, complex problems, unusual encounters, social interactions that required evaluation and decision-making. Alex Taylor, professor of psychology at the University of Auckland, has noted that this memory consolidation appears to support flexible, transferable learning. Crows do not just remember what happened, they extract principles from what happened, rules that apply to new situations they have never encountered before. The crow that watched you in your yard yesterday was not simply resting last night, it was processing you, filing the encounter, weighting it, integrating it into a model that is more complete this morning than it was yesterday evening. You went to sleep and stopped thinking about the crow. The crow did not stop processing information about you. That is not a metaphor. That is neuroscience. Researchers did not expect to find this. In the hours between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., at the deepest point of the night, a subset of crows within large roosts become active. Not all of them, not in response to disturbance. The same specific individuals, on repeated nights, wake up, move within the roost, engage in quiet, sustained vocal behavior directed at specific other birds, and then reposition before settling again. Nathan Emery, professor of cognitive and behavioral neuroscience at Queen Mary University of London, described this behavior in terms his own field found difficult to categorize. It did not match foraging. It did not match predator response. It did not match any territorial or reproductive vocal behavior already documented in the species. Something that appeared, by every measure available, to be social, deliberate, directed. The working hypothesis is what researchers have termed roost-based social maintenance. Certain individuals using the stillness of deep night to manage relationships, to consolidate alliances, to engage in low-stakes social behavior impossible during daylight hours when foraging, territorial defense, and predator vigilance dominate every waking moment. Anne Clark, behavioral ecologist at Binghamton University, documented that the crows most likely to engage in this nighttime activity are those with the most complex social relationships. Not the most dominant, not the most aggressive, the ones with the most to manage, the ones embedded in the densest networks of alliance, rivalry, memory, and mutual obligation. The crows that are most socially intelligent are the ones most likely to be awake at 3 a.m. There is something worth sitting with there. The fourth thing connects everything we have covered into something larger. Crows use the roost to make decisions, not individually, collectively. Crow roosts function, in a measurable behavioral sense, as information markets. Birds arrive carrying experiential data from their individual territories, the vocal exchanges through the night, the movements, the subtle shifts in proximity between specific individuals, all appear to function as a distributed processing system, a way of aggregating information gathered across a wide geographic area into something that influences the entire group the following morning. researchers tracking individual crow movements found that crows foraging unsuccessfully would, on the morning following a roost night, follow other crows to locations they had no prior experience with, locations they could only have learned about through what happened in the roost. Bugnyar has described this as one of the clearest examples in the animal world of socially distributed cognition, intelligence that exists not entirely within individual brains, but in the connections between them, in the transfer of information across a social network. The crow you see in your yard every morning is not operating solely on its own experience. It is operating on a collective knowledge base updated last night and every night before that. Every crow in that roost that has ever encountered a human in your neighborhood has contributed something to what that bird knows. You exist inside a crow information network. You were never asked to consent because the network has no interest in your consent, only in accuracy. The fifth behavior is the quietest, and in some ways, the most significant. Crows grieve at night. Kaylee Swift, whose research on crow responses to death is among the most rigorous work in the field, documented a behavioral response to crow death that has no clean analog in what we typically expect from birds. Crows gather around a dead crow. They call. They sometimes bring objects. They avoid the location of the death for weeks afterward, even when food is present. When a member of the social group does not return to the roost, the behavioral changes among the most closely bonded birds are measurable and sustained. Reduced foraging, altered sleep patterns, increased vigilance that persists well beyond any rational threat assessment timeline. Swift is careful about the language she uses. What she will say is that crows respond to the loss of a known individual in ways functionally consistent with what grief does to a social animal. It changes behavior. It changes attention. It takes time to resolve. In the deep hours of the night, there are crows carrying something the data cannot fully name, but that the behavior makes unmistakably visible. They lost someone, and the night for them is not the same as it was before. We need to stop talking about crows for a moment, because none of what we have covered tonight is ultimately about what crows do. It is about what it means that they do it, that we share the world with an animal that operates this way without our knowledge, without our participation, and without any particular need for our acknowledgement. You have been moving through your life with assumptions about which animals are truly present. The crow on the wire was background. The flock overhead was atmosphere. Tonight, those assumptions have a different weight. The crow is not watching you because you are important to it the way other people are. It is watching you because you are part of its world, and it takes its world more thoroughly and consistently than most of us take the world around us. The crow does not look away. The crow does not get distracted by its own narrative. It pays attention to everything, including you. There is a version of that which is unsettling. But there is another version. The version where a wild animal has been paying that quality of attention to you without agenda, without judgment, without anything to gain except survival, is one of the stranger forms of witness available in an ordinary life. You have been seen, not the version of you that you curate, the version that moves through Tuesday morning without thinking about how it looks, the version that exists when no audience is expected. The crow has been watching that version, and it kept watching, and it remembered. At the beginning of this video, I told you that the last thing we covered would be the one that changed the questions researchers were asking entirely. Here it is. After years of nighttime observation, researchers began asking a question the data had been pointing toward without anyone stating it directly. If crow behavior at 3 a.m. is this complex, this socially organized, this informationally rich, what does that mean about the nature of crow experience during those hours? Not the behavior, the experience. What is it like, if it is like anything, to be a crow in the middle of that roost at the deepest point of the night? Nathan Emery offered a framing that has stayed with the field. He noted that the crow roost at 3 a.m. contains most of what researchers associate with rich social cognition in any species. memory of individuals, management of complex relationships, responses to loss, collective processing of shared experience, communication that appears to carry specific content between specific individuals, all of it happening in the dark, all of it happening without us, all of it happening as it has for thousands of years on a schedule that has nothing to do with when humans are awake and paying attention. The crow does not need to be witnessed. The roost existed before the city was built around it. The grief was being processed in the dark long before anyone thought to document it. What changed is not the crow. What changed is that we finally went to look, and what we found was something operating at full intensity in the hours we had written off as empty. The world has never gone quiet. We just were not there to see it. Tonight, you know what is happening at 3 a.m. in the trees near your house. The birds you see every morning are coming from somewhere. They are carrying something. The night left marks on them that the day will gradually cover over. But now you know what the night was. Before you go, I want to ask you one thing. Think about the crows in your neighborhood, the specific trees where you have seen them gather. The sounds before dawn you may have heard without registering what they were. The mornings when there seemed to be more of them than usual, sitting in a way that felt different, oriented towards something you could not identify. You were not imagining it. You were catching the edge of something that had been going on all night. If you have ever had a moment like that, leave it in the comments. Describe exactly what you remember. I read every single one. I will see you in the next one.